Good morning and welcome to A Public Affair here on KGNU Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. I'm your host today, Shannon Young. I have three guests in the studio today. Ben, who you just heard on Radio Nibbles, will be staying with us, and two more have joined us. Anastasiia Pavlenko is a Ukrainian pianist who recently received her master's degree of music in piano performance at the University of Colorado Boulder. Congratulations for that. And she is currently working as a piano instructor at Parlando School of Music Arts in Boulder, Colorado. She's an organist at United Methodist Church in Broomfield and piano accompanist for the Colorado Children's Chorale. Wow, that's you've got quite a lot going on there. And outside of music, she is passionate about the work she does as a volunteer for the nonprofit organization Sunflower Seeds Ukraine, which of course is having a fundraiser next week. We just discussed part of that in Radio Nibbles, but we're going to get a bit more in depth to it, and as well as hearing what it's like to be all the way here while watching a war unfold at home where your family still lives. My second guest is Viktoriya Oliynyk. She is a Ukrainian native who has lived in Boulder for over a decade. She's currently an associate director of academic technology at CU Boulder, where she has worked since coming to Boulder in 2010. Viktoriya came to the U.S. in 2006, so before coming to Boulder, to pursue graduate studies at Oregon State University. And like many people drawn to this area, she's an avid lover of outdoor activities. And not just you, but also your family. Your eldest daughter summited her first 14er when she was 4 years old. Interesting. Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming into the studio and sharing your experiences today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having us.
Yes, so I have to just ask, what is it like watching this from afar? There's a war unfolding in your home countries where many of your families still live. What is it like watching this from afar?
It is absolutely devastating, and sometimes you feel absolutely powerless. Just because you're from afar, you can really go back, you can help your family, you can help your people. And sometimes you have just to kind of remind yourself that you're still here because, 24/7, you're constantly checking the news, calling on people you love. So I'm sure it's not as hard as being actually in the middle of it and everything that people are going through, but it's quite difficult.
And Anastasiia, you're from Kherson, Ukraine, which was the first major city to fall to Russian occupation?
Correct. I'm from Kherson, yes.
Kherson, okay.
And at the moment, my family was still there. Both my parents, my brother, and his wife.
And how were they able to prepare ahead of time? Because it seemed, at least from the insulation of not having family in Ukraine, to me it just seemed like it happened so quickly. But were there enough warning signs to be able to come up with a contingency plan?
Yes and no. What some people don't understand is that for Ukrainians, the war really started in 2014. So, of course, we saw this coming, but there was always this hope that maybe that's not going to happen. So they had, I think, some little package packed if in case they need to travel. But the moment it started, it became apparent really quickly that it's not safe to leave until you know some more information about what is happening, as simple like what is happening on the roads out of the city.
And without having to delve into specifics if you don't want to, where are they now and how did they get to where they are?
So thankfully, in early April, they managed to escape Kherson, and right now they are in Chernivtsi region. They're in the safer western part of Ukraine. Of course, it's not completely safe. Nowhere is completely safe in Ukraine, but we're very grateful that they managed to escape Kherson in a good condition, given that there were no humanitarian corridors provided.
And what about you, Viktoriya? Where are you from? How was your family?
So I'm from Western Ukraine. I do have family all over Ukraine, like from people on the front lines to people who were in cities next to Bucha that were just devastated during the initial invasion. However, my direct family, my parents live in Western Ukraine, and they actually joined me here in the U.S. A little over a month ago.
And are there any kind of concessions or things being done to make visas a bit easier?
Good question. So visas are actually a lot more difficult, and many people who escaped Ukraine were trying to get to the US, and it was nearly impossible because the wait times at any embassy, especially in Poland and other European countries, were just booked up like up to a year ahead. And that was a barrier. And now we do have United for Ukraine program, which is simplifying some of the steps. Like my parents particularly, they did have a visa prior to that, so they were able to just travel here. And I know a lot of people are now benefiting from the United for Ukraine program.
And I think a lot of people who maybe don't have families that have to cross borders regularly may be unfamiliar with the fact that visas just stopped for a long time during the pandemic. Legal immigration plunged to a historic low. So a lot of the backlog, or a lot of the appointments that are being made now, are backlogged from since the start of the pandemic. So, and right now, the Supreme Court today, if they haven't done it already, will be deciding a very important case when it comes to asylum seekers' rights, the Remain in Mexico policy. And I've also seen parts where Ukrainians are also in Mexico trying to cross that way as well, along with many other nationalities trying to cross into the U.S. So it's a lot harder than many people seem to think. And even with the political will to extend legal mechanisms to allow more Ukrainians in, it doesn't, the reality doesn't always match what the perception may be in the media. I want to ask all three of you really about your organization, the Sunflower Seeds for Ukraine. When did it start? How did it get started? And approximately how large is it?
So it started more informally back in 2014 during the initial Russian invasion. Then when the war started in February, of course, we were in complete shock, and within a few days we managed to pull ourselves to action instead of just sitting in front of the phone checking news and like crying day and night and just not knowing what to do with just overpowering emotions. We connected with all the people who were involved previously and figured out how to provide medical aid, initially more medical aid, now also protective gear to Ukrainian defenders. You ask how many people are involved. Well, it's about, I'd say, currently we have around 5 or 6 people in the US. We also have several volunteers in Poland, because how it works is that we buy supplies like aid, some here, some in Europe, depending what is easier to get where, because it doesn't make sense to ship things that are already readily available in Europe. Then in Warsaw, Poland, we have a group of volunteers who finds volunteers who can transport to Ukraine, and then in Western Ukraine, in Rivne, we have a hub of Ukrainian volunteers who distribute it and manage delivery to the front lines. And when I say front lines, we've been in touch and helping many different brigades. Like some brigades are just people who are going to the front lines from Western Ukraine, and those people can take aid with them. Some brigades reached out to us. They provide official letters from their brigade requesting what exactly they need and how much. And just the way we operate allows us to respond to those requests relatively quickly, because we buy here, then volunteers. You ask how many people I'm talking about the core group. If you're asking how many people are involved in general, it's probably hundreds at this point, because we have volunteers who travel to Europe and are willing to take bags of supplies with them. We have a fantastic family from Netherlands that just traveled to Ukraine about a week ago, and they took 26 bags of aid that they were willing to haul with them as they were going to visit their family in Poland. So yeah, I would just sum up saying that was all the devastation and just like evil powers that we see in Ukraine. There is also like so much good sprouting in this world, like even with this example that I told you, a family being willing to take $26 with them, and I think that helps people just go on and continue living lives and just like working towards a better future for all of us.
Well, and I'd mentioned you have a kid who loves outdoors life, and what's it like, and how do you communicate it as a parent? There's got to be a lot of anxiety of just, you look at your phone and, right? And how do you communicate what you are processing and what is the, it's part of the origin story of your kids. Like,
yep.
While you're in the, physical, like, bubble of safety in Boulder.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something that I, of course, didn't think about from the get-go. Of course, my child, I have 2 children now, actually, a little one that is just 5 months old. The older one, of course, saw that we are stressed, and I very quickly noticed how easily children absorb that and notice. And on the first day of the war, our Serbian friend called us, and that was one of the things he warned us: just really look out for your children. You don't know how much they understand and how much they how much the emotions they just like reflect the ones that you have. So we did talk to my daughter at the level of like there are bad people in Ukraine, because she's asking, Mama, why are you crying? Actually, I'll share one conversation with you that we had in the car during the first days of the war. So she asked, like, Mama, so there are these bad people in Ukraine, like, why can't police, like, do anything? And I'm like, well, it's like there are too many of them, it's too difficult for police. Like, there are a lot of people in Ukraine working on that, but they can't do anything. And then she paused and thought for a moment, Mom, but why can't other countries help? And I'm talking about 5-year-old. And I just paused. I didn't know how to answer that, because I know countries are helping, but as we can all see, it's been months. It's been several months, and there is so much suffering. There are so many deaths and civilians innocently dying, and there is no power in the world, apparently, that can do something about it. So anyway, back to my child. She drew a picture of wizard and a wizard that can save Ukraine. But I think at this point, now that months have passed, like we've learned how to manage our emotions better and how to shield her better. And for her, thankfully, it does remain at the level that there are bad people in Ukraine, and she doesn't know much more than that.
And Anastasiia, you were in Boulder watching this entire saga play out, and with your family in eastern Ukraine, you were sometimes unable to speak with them, and this was all playing out as you're completing your master's degree.
Correct. Yeah. So it was extremely stressful. My parents, they actually at the moment they were at the southern Ukraine. So it's important to know that Kherson is the first state right above Crimea. So for a while, it already felt like we're living on a ticking bomb that can explode any moment, which is exactly what happened in the very first days of the war. It was definitely very stressful. I was finishing my master's degree. I was working as a teaching assistant at the University of Colorado, as well as keeping the other 3 jobs that I currently have. So it was, 4 jobs and master's degree, and being constantly on the phone, checking news, talking to my parents. I don't know how exactly I managed to overcome everything that has happened. My friends, my family keep telling me that, oh, we're so proud of you that you managed to finish it, and how did you manage to finish it the way you did? And honestly, I don't have any other answer that you just do what you have to do, and especially seeing how people of my country are suffering so much every day. People are murdered and killed for no reason. And, in a way, it feels like, who am I to say that it's difficult for me to be here having all of these privileges, having privilege to study in a peaceful university where nothing is happening above you. So I feel like that idea of being very thankful for what I have was helping me to stay afloat and, not get overly depressed, just like a little depressed, I guess. that helped a lot. And just making sure that, if we Ukrainians around the world who have the privilege to live in peaceful countries right now, if we start breaking down, then who's going to help our people who are still inside of Ukraine, people who are suffering, who have no way to help themselves. So I think it's on us to keep it together, to continue power through and continue finding ways how we can help our people back in Ukraine.
And you are an accomplished pianist. How does having a creative outlet help you manage the stress and anxiety?
It definitely helped. To this day, I will always remember my second degree recital as the most difficult concert I had to play, because I had to play a concert to finish my degree on, I think it was March 6th. I can't even remember anymore. I think it was March 6th, right? Because it was the 9th day after the war started. Mm-hmm. And it was the most difficult thing I ever had to do. I remember my beautiful, wonderful professor, Dr. Jennifer Hagee, she asked me, she said, if you want, we can push it. And I said, no, we're not pushing it, we're doing it. And the worst thing that happened to me that day is that in the morning, I tried to call my parents, and I woke up in the morning, the first thing you do, you check messages from your parents, and they sent me a message earlier that night, for them, daytime, saying that they are shutting off all of the internet connection and cell phone connection in Kherson, so we won't be able to talk to you, and we don't know when we'll be able to connect you. And that happened on the morning of my recital. So going into recital thinking that, I hope at least they will be able to watch my live stream, I even don't know if they're still alive. So that was absolutely horrible. Thankfully, I would say like 2 hours before my recital, they got Wi-Fi connection back, not cell phone connection, but Wi-Fi connection back. So they called me. They managed to tell me that, they're still alive. They are semi-safe. And they actually did manage to watch the live stream of my recital. But to answer your question, actually, the little recording of me that you played at the beginning was from that recital. Yeah. And I feel like, in a way, it was the most difficult performance I had to do, but also the most powerful and the most energy-giving performance as well, because it was not just about the music. Now it was for the higher cause.
And Benjamin, I see you over here, and we have you in the studio, so anytime you want to just add something, feel free.
Thank you, Shen. I really don't have, maybe what I could add, I heard Anastasia's recital, the one she's referring to, the second one, and I imagine like a lot of your listeners, I'm a Colorado native. It's difficult to relate to these stories. One thing that you really are impressed upon when you see Anastasiia and Viktoriya is how kind of normal, I suppose, for lack of a better term, their lives seem to be. They live very Colorado lives. Anastasiia is a very typical CU student, and it's almost just too much for, I think, an average American to comprehend that this amount of pain, devastation, challenge is going on in their lives at the same time. The little that we knew, it almost, Anastasia's recital, it was so incredibly well played, but it was also just emotionally overwhelming to think, wow, this person is going through things I have no way to relate to. I have absolutely no way to relate to. So.
And I'm wondering, just small gestures. You can go, you can travel across Boulder, and you see Ukrainian flags outside of homes, or, small gestures like that. What kind of meaning does that have for you, just to see those small things?
I can start, Anastasiia can add. It is very supportive. It's uplifting. I think the first flag that I heard about, someone told me, like, there is a flag in the neighborhood. I'm like, tell me the address. I want to go see it. And actually, my neighbors cut out and put little paper flags in their window, like pretty much on day 2 of war. Yeah, and it's such a great silent way to just, and very visible way to show support.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's the small gestures that you see everywhere. And, also random people that you meet, learning that you're from Ukraine, and immediately asking, do you have family there? How are you doing? How are they doing? I felt definitely overwhelmingly loved ever since the full-scale invasion happened in Ukraine. As you asked this question, the very first story that came to my mind actually happened at the church I used to work at the moment. I used to work at Nativity of Our Lord Catholic Church in Broomfield at the moment, and I remember that after one of the masses that I finished, this very, very, very old grandpa came to me, and I know him a little bit. I know that he lives by himself. I know he shared some things with me. I know that he's definitely not a man of means. He doesn't have that much, financial support. And he comes to me and he gives me $100 bill in his hand, and he says, "This is all I can do, but please, can you donate it to any humanitarian cause that you have access to? Because I'm so old, I can't even do it online, and I don't know where to go, and I really want to help." And just understanding that for some people, $100 bill could be nothing. For him, it was a huge chunk of what he can afford in a month. And the fact that he lives by himself in this very vulnerable old age, but he still feels, the urge or the inspiration to give that money to help other people in need, just really, really, it touched me to the core.
Anastasiia, you had mentioned earlier, part of the impetus to compartmentalize some of the stress and anxiety is to be able to hold it together, to be ready to help people. Ukrainians in diaspora have this responsibility on their shoulders now to be able to hold it together, to be able to receive and help others leaving. Can you give us an idea of how large this diaspora is, and what are the needs that you can most readily identify as things that should be put into place immediately?
Before the war started, actually, the biggest need for me was understanding that there are a lot of Ukrainians in Colorado, but we are not really connected. We don't know of our existence. We don't know where we are. So in a way, it was a call to connect, to unite, and to stay united together in this. So if anything, that was a very beautiful thing that came out of it.
Yeah, in terms of the needs, you're talking about the needs in Ukraine, right?
Well, and also, being able to, where you are now, what are the needs for people who may long-term have to leave Ukraine? Yeah. But, I mean, needs are either inside and outside.
Yeah. So, I think I can speak more about the needs of the people that we are supporting, because it's we would love to help everyone. It's impossible to help everyone and meet every need. So we have been focusing on Ukrainian defenders, and I want to explain why. Because to some people, it seems like you want to help more to a family who has fled, who has not a house anymore. In some way, it might be more satisfying than helping people who are fighting and killing Russians. That's what's sadly happening now in the 21st century. So the needs, the Ukrainian defenders, we hear a lot about other countries helping Ukraine with their military needs. However, I don't know the details of that. I know that mostly they're helping with weapons, which is, I guess, a priority, but to some extent it tells me that human lives might be not of that much value if people are focusing on the weapons, because so many of them don't have first aid kits, emergency first aid kits that you can use when you are wounded on the battlefield. Also, various protective gear like knee pads, helmets. So many of them, you can see that on pictures, they do not have helmets. Then also just different binoculars, vision devices, things like that can help them. And we hear about the needs from the defenders. We started with medical aid kits, and then they're asking, can you provide this? Can you provide this? This is a need. And I'll also add that it's not just rumors and words in individual brigades that we are hearing from. A few weeks ago, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine had shared statistics that about 50% of the bulletproof vests were provided for the country by volunteers. 50% were provided by the state, and the rest by volunteers. So you can understand the scale. And when we are talking bulletproof vest, I think the average cost of one is $500, $600. We were able to provide some, but it's expensive. The reason we were first focusing on medical kits, because it's cheaper and it's more readily available. You can get it to people quickly, but ideally we would have better protective gear in addition to medical aid kits.
Well, we are in our final seconds of this program. We're going to end on Anastasia's piano recital. I want to thank my guests today, Anastasiia Pavlenko, Viktoriya Oliynyk, and Benjamin Teitelbaum. Thank you so much, all three of you, for coming in and for sharing your stories and experiences with our audiences.
Thank you for having me.